We are live. Vlog Thursday 418 MACH2 multi-actuator drives. And we'll talk about that in a second. I want to roll back really quickly here to last week's discussion. There's been very small amounts of progress on the idea essentially I had last week about how to recover S3. And so far, no one's been able to really answer it. At least I've engaged with the engineers over at Storage, and they misunderstood the problem. So I just emailed them back a clarification because they're like, well, yeah, this works. I'm like, functionally, I know it works. That wasn't the question. I know you have immutability in your buckets. And so to roll backwards to last week's problem and how I've been noodling around about this, essentially the threat model is, and this goes directly to me doing that video on using Storage A to back up your TrueNAS. And this applies to other companies like Backblaze as well, Wasabi, and several others. There's not an easy way if someone gets your API key and purges your bucket, and your bucket does have the option, and let's assume you've turned it on for immutability or revisioning to say, hey, hold on to these versions for X number of days. There's not a rollback that's easy to do. It's easy to roll back a file. That part's simple. It just doesn't scale very well. And so far, some of the utilities I've seen have been a little lacking. So work is being done. And eventually when we have a workable solution, and it's another friend helping with this, once we have a workable solution, my friend Chris I'm sorry if I don't know, Chris, I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. I don't want to say it wrong. And he may jump in. I think he jumps in as his name here. I don't know. I like to tell people's last names unless they want me to tell it. Anyways, there's a solution being worked on, but a solution has not been found yet. All right. You were just looking at these drives here today. I don't need them, but technology is interesting. They appear hard to get, though, aimed at enterprise. Yes. To my knowledge, they don't... is it the SMR is the bad one? Whatever the bad version they used to make, CMR, SMR. To my knowledge, they don't make them anymore. I could be wrong. 14 terabyte is quite low density for new drives. What about SATA SSDs? These capacities are even more. Yeah, they make bigger ones. I just happen to have, because these are some drives my friend brought over to do some testing with. I happen to have 14s, but buy whatever works for you in terms of size and price. I didn't determine either of those. They belong to my friend. So he's letting me borrow them to test them. Yeah, shingled is the bad one, right? Okay. Morning from the land down under. Like to see our folks from Australia join in today. I like the Seagates overall, but only their enterprise ones. The Seagate Exos have been pretty good for the most part. But I actually, and I've got to pull this up now. This is kind of funny. I rebooted the system and I didn't seem to have any problems. It seemed to reboot, but we're gonna do all this together, folks. I've got a problem right now. And we didn't make any changes. It was working perfectly fine last night. I took the screenshots, did the testing, blah, blah, blah. No problem. I just booted it up and it's not working. So I'm trying to figure out why. Before I reboot it, we're going to share this tab and pull it up. So right now, make this pretty. It's failing to load and I don't know why. So it's weird because it actually sees the storage. So if we manage devices, they're there. By the way, this is a TrueNAS problem. I did ask TrueNAS when the support is coming for this. TrueNAS doesn't officially support them, so you can't set these up via the UI. They don't work via the UI. You have to set it up via the command line and bring the pool in. You're still in bed because it's really early or really late? What time? Actually, I should look at that. What time is it? I don't know what city you're in. Time is it in Australia? 6:36 a.m. So it is really early in Australia. I thought That sounds right. Okay. 630. Perfect. All right. So it sees the drives, but it's not. So what we want to do is we're going to reboot because I don't know. Actually, I'm going to shut down first. Double check that the drives are seated well. And I'm going to hit the power button real quick. All right. Power button pressed. So now I'm curious why it's, it's showtime and it ain't working. Because I was going to simulate a failure mode. That was actually on my to-do list because why not simulate failure modes during live streams? That way, you can tell they're not doctored. But it seems to have simulated its own failure mode before the live stream. So now the live stream's turning into troubleshooting mode, I guess. If you get the SATA ones, it's probably easier to set these up. But these SAS ones are pretty cool, except setting up in TrueNAS is a little bit tedious. If you're not using TrueNAS, it's probably a moot point. If you're just using Linux to set these up, probably not a big deal. But if you're using TrueNAS, that's there's some steps. And I know there's probably a better way to do this. I've always used ZFS with TrueNAS through the UI. And that's where the challenge comes in, is especially the SAS ones. I don't think you have a problem if you have SATA, but if you have the SAS ones, this is the problem. Do the dual actuator drives show up as single or two? If you have a SAS one, they show up as two. The problem is there's not a proper facility inside of TrueNAS to deal with that. And you would think, oh, they just show up as two. TrueNAS can see them. No, TrueNAS expects each drive to have a unique serial number. It sees for every two drives that are displayed, it only has one physical drive, therefore has one serial number. And that confuses TrueNAS. Now, this is just a coding problem that they definitely could fix. So eventually, I imagine they'll add support for them. But as of right now, this is not a supported feature inside of TrueNAS. So the solution to building them is build it from the command line and then go inside of TrueNAS and import the pool. Then it works. At least that's the solution I was working until it wasn't working. So here's all the drives. And by the way, this is the what it looks like. There's only 7 drives in here. So 7 drives in here. Failed. Cannot mount the file system. Huh. It doesn't really tell me why, though. Maybe I'll export and import the pool again. Is a TrueNAS problem trying to do the internal RAID, or is it just setting them up at all? Oh, it's just setting them up at all with TrueNAS. It's a TrueNAS problem because TrueNAS is expecting to see serial numbers. Now, as far as I know, the SATA ones are fine because the SATA ones will show up as single drives. So the SATA, no problem there. Yeah, the SATA work different. Now, Wendell did a video on both of these. I'll throw a link to the level 1 text forums, but Wendell has 2 videos, one for SATA, one for SAS model. And it's pretty cool. One of the things he has is a script right here, because this is one of the things I was going to show and we want to get to, but clearly TrueNAS is not cooperating. Let's see if it worked this time. Let me throw the link for anyone who wants to read the level 1 text forums. Okay, they're showing up there, not showing up here. Interesting. Let's just disconnect the pool. Oh. Huh. So is it the apps? Okay, let's just export disconnect. Maybe this is the problem. Unset pool. So it apparently doesn't like applications. Okay, pool has been unset. Oh, so that's definitely where the problem is with it. Huh. Well, let's go ahead and export and re-import the pool and see if we can make this happy. Yeah, it seems to be working. All right. Import pool. Looks like that's working. So something with the applications is the problem. Let's keep going through this simulation here. We're going to break it in real time here. There we go. Hey, look. It's there along with all the data that's in it. So that worked. For the hell of it, let's go ahead and reboot it so you can watch the reboot process. Break all the things. And matter of fact, it's easy. The things broke before the live stream. We didn't have to try to simulate a failure. The failure occurred on its own. Yeah, I've never looked at any of the ones from external enclosures. I imagine, though, if you're using SATA, then it wouldn't matter. This is only a problem if you're using the SAS ones. So this is really a SAS problem. This is not a ZFS issue, completely a TrueNAS issue. If you do ZFS from the command line or you're not using TrueNAS, no problem. Matter of fact, that's the issue, is you have to build these from the command line. There's not a way to do this from the TrueNAS UI. TrueNAS UI will not let you set up these drives. This is whatever motherboard the HL15 ships with. I think I'll find the specs real quick. There we go. It's this one right here. I'll drop the link for people. It is the Supermicro X11 SPF NC TPF. Just rolls off the tongue. So X11 SPF. Well, this is the important part about setup. You have to split these. And that's what I was going to show. I'll show the split on these. They have to be split into different VDEVs to mitigate that risk. So the risk of using the SATA ones is that you'll set them up improperly. And if you pull out one drive, that's going to remove two drives from ZFS. So you need to make sure each drive should be in a separate VDEV. That'll give you better, generally speaking, that should give you better performance as well. Still booting. But at least we're not erroring. It seems to be booting without an error. Because that's the important part. that we boot without errors. Why is it stuck on the networking now? That's a completely new problem. But that's okay. I like new problems. There we go. That's happy. This is the downside of doing things in real time on a live stream. You know, this is actually what suppose things. It takes a lot of time recording videos when you're doing these setups. You do a lot of waiting. And so there's a ton of recording. This is why I was talking to a friend about this the other day. When I make a YouTube video, the project video is 10 gigs of videos to build it. The output is 1 gig. So it's like a roughly, and it can vary, 10-to-1 ratio for what you record versus after you edit and actually export it all. But it works, and now we don't have a problem. But it's weird because I think the problem was here is with the apps. Huh. Well, we'll come back to the apps because what I want to do now is share what the drive layout looks like. Let's do it from this command line, seeing as it's open. Now that's weird. It's given some of these a different ID, but what was the command? It's lsci -L. There we go. The problem is finding all these drives and making sure which one is which one. Actually, I wonder if I can do this. Oops. I need the bash history. I'm doing this complete. Someone's yelling because Tom's an idiot today. Tom is tired. Is there no bash history? Huh, there's not. Oh, wait. Is it -U? There we go. That's the one I wanted. Because it's easier to see the problem. Yeah. The drives broke, Tom. I am over the cold. These drives are from Railstream. If you, just so people know, and we found a new problem, Mr. Railstream. There's a if we apparently put the applications on, it loses the drives until we delete the applications and put them back. I don't know why. Definitely a weird bug in TrueNAS. So this is new bug. But what we're showing is when you do these, and I'd have to SSH. You know what? Let me SSH in because that'll make this a lot easier, or at least use this so I can make it bigger. So if we type in and we list the drives, I guess, is that as big as I can make this? Yeah. You notice every other drive has a 1 in it going down the middle. That's the easiest way to like visually describe it. And this is what Wendell script does, is find these. And you want to put every other one in each of the pools. This way, as I said earlier, if one physical drive fails, whoops. Oh, never mind. I have to do this as root, so I got to change the root password. Always something. Always something. So credentials. There we go. Save. Shell. Try to type the same password again. There we go. Huh. But that doesn't work when you do SU. Weird. It just says KVM not found. Huh. Well, I usually SSH in. I guess I'll try to SSH in. But essentially, I can show you that through the web UI too. This is where the web UI gets confusing. Because when we look at things like managed disk, it only sees disks that have serial number. It doesn't see all the disks. But if we go to storage and we look at managed devices, there they are. Here's all the ones that don't have serial numbers. Here's all the ones that do. This is where the confusion kind of comes in with the system of it sees them, but when they don't have serial numbers, they don't show up properly because they're weird disks. Now, I've actually seen this behavior before because I have played around with all kinds of virtualizing of TrueNAS. Because when I tell people not to virtualize TrueNAS or all the problems that come with it, it's not because I didn't try it. It's because I did. And you get weird problems. Like when I was passing through block devices, but not completely. I remember it was a weird scenario I came up with, but TrueNAS will do this because it's unable to read the drive fully. But these, it recognizes as drives. See how it's got the disk info here. But if we click on this, it's not changing the disk info because it's not updating that. These have disk info. It also can't do smart tests on the secondary part, at least not that I can find. You can do smart tests on them, and you can do them individually, which I think is neat. So even though it's physically one drive, you can do 2 smart tests. That's kind of novel. The problem you had was because of SAS and TrueNAS. No, TrueNAS supports SAS. The problem is because the dual actuator SAS are not well supported in TrueNAS. This is a dual actuator SAS problem, not a true a dual actuator SAS with TrueNAS. Tongue twister. This, if you're using ZFS, is not a problem. But if you buy dual actuator drives, problem. So 2 spindles share the same platters. No. There's only one spindle, one platter, 2 sets of read-write heads. So there's one spindle spinning and just the extra read-write heads split between them. So you're close. Yeah. So it's a really clever design because one of the challenges you have is seek times, because if the drive head's busy, it can only do so much. It can only go around, the platters are spinning, and we have moved to multiple read-write heads in a system. But figuring out which read-write heads you want to use, well, that can be a problem because I want this piece of data, and even if it's scattered across here, it may not be lined up perfectly. So I want the top read-write head, the middle read-write head, et cetera, et cetera. Now what it can do is the read-write heads are grouped independently of each other. So we have one set of read-write heads and another set of read-write heads, and they act as individual drives. And in a way they are, because they're using different platters. It's a great concept. I'm actually surprised this didn't happen sooner. And it gets a lot more speed. It's not just in theory that it gets more speed. It really does genuinely get more speed. That's one of the things that Wendell covered really well in there, is this actually puts SATA closer to saturating the entire link of the SATA connector with a spinning drive. And it's not something that was possible with spinning drives. So if I try sudo I, I'm curious about this because I usually just log in as root. Well, I'm SSHing in as root is what I should say. So if we try sudo I, actually, what do we try? Sudo z pull. Oh, the password's really complicated for. I'm not going to mess with that. I rarely use this. I only use it for pretty much the only time I ever use the shell for this is when I'm doing a demo, so I don't have to SSH in. If we SSH in, and then I share that, which is a little trickier to share, but let's go ahead and do that. Actually, you know what I was playing with here? What was the port for this? Hold on. Something else I was testing and setting up. I wanted to play with Swifty. Actually, I think the question is, can I use connection? All right, I got to set this so it allows it. Swifty is a web-enabled SSH. I was just playing. Someone suggested it, and I was like, "I'll play with that." I got to first tell the system to allow root with password, because by default, which is proper, this is a lab system, so it's fine. But by default, you don't get to log in as root with password. You have to allow that. Actually, will it let it? Maybe not. Oh, they took out the ability. Smart. Allow password authentication. Yeah, there is no more. Root password is missing now. That's actually clever. Huh. Well, I won't be doing that then. But if you haven't heard of it, just in case anyone's curious, this is just a little Docker container that lets you run in the web SSH or Telnet. Telnet's kind of weird, but let's see. This is what it looks like. So I can just run the commands inside of here. And you can keep opening up more tabs. Matter of fact, let's open it. There's a tab. There's a tab. Yeah, that's cool. Actually, you remembered the credentials, so I can log into more than one. Well, it's kind of, does it have an option to change this? I don't see a color option, but it does seem to do some coloring here. It's pretty cool. You can make it bigger. Ah, neat. It's a Docker container for anyone wondering. Big benefit sounds like better speed out of the same footprint. With one spindle, you have a single point of failure, but you get the speed of 2 drives with footprint of 1. Yeah, I mean, you are increasing complexity because you're adding. Well, actually, let me grab something. You're not adding as much as you think. So this is what's going on here. Let me make it full screen. You have inside of modern drives lots of platters. So this, I forget what drive this came out of. One of them Tom took apart. But anyways, you have lots of platters. So you already have all the platters. You already have all the read-write heads. What you're doing is making them independent of each other. So it's not a dramatic jump in complexity. It is more complex because now we have to present them as two drives, which means technically now we have the controller split in two, which is weird, but manageable. But you've already got, physically, you have the same number of parts. I guess you have dual voice coils as opposed to one because you have to move them independent of each other. But conceptually, it's really cool. Any word on the wattage of these tools? Yeah, it says slightly higher, but that's not a term. That's not a technical term. Power consumption. How much power does it do? Oh, so let's, when in doubt, look at spec sheets provided by the manufacturer. Optimizes IOPS per watt, so they claim better. Where's the wattage on here? That's not bad. 8 watts. I think the other ones are 6. So this is the MACH2 drive. And let's look up Seagate Exos power consumption. So it goes from 5 watts to 8 watts. Not bad. So a small increase, but a big performance increase. Yeah, they're actually really quiet too. That's definitely definitely another bonus on there. Yeah, the SATA ones are not engineered the same way. The SATA just show up. They're just one drive because it's doing it at the geometry level of the drive. So you present with SATA with one logical disk, one serial number, looks like a normal hard drive internally. And this is where I don't know how good they're going to perform. I don't think you're going to get near the same performance out of the ones that are going to be built on SATA until the drives actually have more data on them, because you have this weird split going on. The drives have the first part of the partition for one actuator and the rest of the partition for another. At least that's what I understood it from the way Wendell was describing it, which means if you're only filling up the front part of the drive, well, you don't really get better performance because all your data seeking is being done by one set of heads. But once you're getting the data across the entire drive, well, now both heads have an opportunity to do it. Wendell's suggestion for that to get the better performance was to partition them and then put the partitions, and there's ways to do this with ZFS. You would actually partition them so one partition goes to one VDEV. It's completely an off book, not way you would normally set up ZFS, but there's methodologies by which you can make that work. I wouldn't recommend it. But the SAS ones, you can say, as I did, this one goes in this VDEV and this one goes in this VDEV. So you take one drive and split that drive between VDEVs. And as you fill up a VDEV, the data is written to each VDEV symmetrically. So we only have 2 VDEVs. If I write 1 gig, half of that goes on one and half goes on the other. Pretty simple. Yeah, that's just what you're saying. The SATA ones, you have to just use partitioning to make that work. Now let's go ahead just to show what happens for people wondering. What happens if I pull a drive out? I'm only going to pull one drive because this is only a RAID Z1, which means we can survive a single drive loss out of each VDEV. And if I did this right when we set it up last night, if I pull one drive out, 2 drives should drop out. So let's see what happens. All right. We got some errors over here dumping. So we lost some drives. Go back over to TrueNAS. I have an entire business channel for business advice. So if you go to lawrence.video/biz, that's where I have business advice videos. My first advice, and always is the same for years, is I hate my job is not a business plan. So my advice for starting an MSP is, do you have some plan, or you just plan to be cheaper than the other guy? That's where that whole rabbit hole starts. So I've got a video called I hate my job is not a business plan on my business channel. I'll plug my business channel. I need to post some more stuff there. But if anyone wants to watch, there's plenty of content there. The content's still relevant. If anyone wants to watch the business videos, are over there. All right, we have now suffered some failures. Critical, two disks removed. If we manage, and we did it right. We did it right. we didn't destroy an entire one. We degraded two separate VDEVs as expected. So let me push the drive back in and see if it works. Oh, no problem. Make sure you check out the video is titled "I Hate My Job is Not a Business Plan." It's about starting an IT business. So it's where my advice starts. Is I don't gatekeep and tell people not to start businesses. I also don't oversell the lie of entrepreneurship that this is the path to success for everyone. All right. It's recognized the drives. So it sees them plug back in. Even though, well, it recognizes drives plug back in, even though I only moved one single drive. Now, the other curiosity I have, and I'll assume this because they have smart on each individual drive on the SaaS model, that with the SaaS models, they probably, in a failure scenario, would be you have bad sectors on a section of platters. So that makes it even weirder, because if you have all these platters, like I was showing earlier, and you got a big group of them, what happens if the platters, one goes bad, but the rest of the drive is good? What if one of the sets of read heads goes bad, but the second one isn't bad? So yeah, that becomes a different failure. Like, how often should you replace that? Should you let it go longer because half the drive is good, but you got to figure out how to manage and deal with that? What is the performance if you use it striped? Probably faster. I didn't do like stripe performance. It's, it's one of those things like, if I've got people who want to play with RAID 0 sometimes, but I don't know. It's novel to see how fast you get out of a drive, but Wendell's got benchmarks he posted. And I'm not going to bother repeating them because I don't have as fast of a system as he tested them on. Hey, look, the system's happy again. Back online, no errors. See, if we type in the status, it should be just where does that show in here? Oh, there it goes. I knew it was in here somewhere. Finished resolver. ZFS, well, TrueNAS will automatically resilver if you pull a drive out, but then put that same drive back in, like a temporary loss of drive. It'll just resilver any data that changed between then. Now, something else that I want to try is the problem we seem to have from the beginning. So let's reboot this system again, just for the hell of it. Restart the system. We'll let it watch the screen while it reboots. I want to reboot it, make sure it comes up fine with no errors. And then I want to add the applications again, because that's a weird problem that the apps don't work. That's or that the apps kept it from importing the pool. SATA version is cursed. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really done the math on these yet. I mean, I like the performance idea from the SAS models. I don't know if the SATA provides as much value. It's kind of a question for sure. I'm excited for this. I should check my Kickstarter because you reminded me, and we'll pull this up while we're waiting for this to boot. Do I have any messages? Let me look. No. But the Jet KVM is shipping. I have the one that they sent me, but some people have got those. I filled out my thing, gave them my address of where to ship it to. It has not arrived yet. But I'm excited for it because these things are great. Like I use it. I've really used it a lot. So yeah. But a bunch of people are posting pictures of them, like not my tech YouTube friends, but like people who back them have mentioned that they've got them. I'm excited. I mean, this has been a great device. All my usage of it has been solid. Like I'm really happy with how well it's performed. I did the same thing. I did not put my address in, which is it's kind of funny that I mean, I guess they know who I am, but they didn't tie it together that my email, they emailed me corresponded with the same email I use for Kickstarter. So yeah. Almost booted. You know, I like server motherboards for their reliability and robustness. I hate how long the boot screens are for server motherboards. You got yours last week. That is awesome. Do you like it? I guess. Is it, now that you've received it, what do you think of it? Because I gave away all my, gave them to other technicians, but I don't use my my other ones much anymore. I'm getting rid of them all. I ordered a few of the Jet KVMs, and yeah. Yeah, I mean the Bly KVM, I still have one hooked up. It's not bad, but it's certainly not the Jet KVM. The Jet KVM is way better. All right, this will be the last test we do with this. So we log in. I don't see an error. There's our data sets. Everything's happy. It's working. Let's go to apps. Choose pool. Choose. Oh, that's interesting. Deploying because it found this. All right. Everything's working. It's happy. There's our data set. All is well. Let's reboot it again. Restart. Let's see if it breaks. So they're awesome. So easy to get up and running. And that was how I felt about it. Like, awesome and easy to get up and running. Like, those are the traits you're looking for. When it comes to setting up TrueNAS, this is how my system is as well. I generally you special purpose each pool in TrueNAS. So this is my production TrueNAS, and we have the this pool's called Rusty, and this pool's called Flashy. And if we look at the storage, there's Flashy and Rusty, and you can make some assumptions about what drives are in there, but that's all the performance stuff. When I'm doing my video editing, I do it on Flashy. Once I'm done editing, I throw it on Rusty. But one nice thing is that even though it's a RAID Z2 with 9 terabyte drives with 8 of them in there, it actually performs well enough with 4K 60 footage. So I don't really have a problem. It's not as fast, but it's really close. And the moment it's cached, it's quite fast. As a matter of fact, one of the important things to do is make sure that you've got it cached. So here is the cache that's almost always full on this to keep my video editing going smooth. Turbo KVM. You should make a Sparky for those questionable drives. Yeah. I think mirrored VDEVs are not the most storage efficient way to do it. So I've not done a large comparison lately. There's people who have, but you lose so much storage efficiency that I prefer the VDEVs. Putting several VDEVs together is where the performance is. If that's assuming you have a lot of drives. So it's not like there's one answer. I have an entire long write-up to break that all down because it comes down to drive counts and IOP performance that you're looking for. And you're like, oh, wait, I can have it faster if I do this, but then you sacrifice your storage efficiency. And if you don't need storage efficiencies, awesome. If you do need storage efficiency, less awesome. I purchased a Jet KVM. Sometimes it's cheaper to send a device to connect with Tailscale than flying to a person. Yeah. You could just mail a Jet KVM to someone and put like Tailscale on there, have it phone home and say, just plug this in and I'm going to take over everything. Yes. All right. Moment of truth. Did we break it? And probably. I have a feeling this broke it. Nope, it didn't break it. Okay, I got nothing. I have no idea what made it break. Apps are working. All right, I'm out of ideas of why I broke it because I can't reproduce problem. Ticket closed. Problem can't be reproduced. Opinion on NVMe storage for HomeLab. 10 gig doesn't let you fully take advantage of throughput, but could IOP still benefit? Sure. I guess, what do you need the performance for? I feel like some people, and it's not a bad thing to do, but they're going for performance numbers for the sake of performance numbers. Like I need to get the files from here to there in not 8 seconds, but 4. And I'm willing to spend any amount of money to cut that time in half as opposed to waiting 4 seconds. I always ask what the goal is, because I see what I'm doing, is a production thing, editing video that is 4K 60. There's, it's high res. I've done this in ProRes. It works fine in that, but this is just below ProRes because it's not just 4K 60. It's 4K 60 H.264. But I'm not doing as many keyframes, so the files are actually really big, so there's less compression. And 10 gigs of projects is a typical, like the last video I did on Storage, which is only about 10-minute video. There's 10 gigs of files in there. And I open up my tool, DaVinci Resolve, and I can scrub through that perfectly fine. And that's all running on just standard SATA SSD. That's not running on NVMe. So NVMe, like if you were saying, okay, I want really high performance for my VMs, okay, then maybe you want to build a NAS with NVMe. So it's not that it's not worth it. I mean, you can spend as much as you want. It's not a value question to me. Is it worth it to you? I think I may have answered the value question to me of, is it worth it? And that's Tom showing the fact that he doesn't have, you look at my storage here, the fact that I'm not running NVMEs to edit my videos on might give you an idea that I didn't find the value of buying more than 4 drives that are 2 terabytes each worth it for video editing. But that's me. That may not be the value that you place upon it. Also, sometimes Tom's kind of cheap. I mean, I have money. I could spend money on more hard drives, but I buy other things. And like Jason said, 10 gigs will do about 1.25. So yes. I like it when Jason sends me a DM as well. Is NVMe cheaper than SATA right now? I haven't looked. I feel like it would be at some point crossing a threshold, but I don't know where that threshold is. From a form factor standpoint, NVMe is kind of cool. The fact that your SATA drives take up a lot more space, but if you pop open a SATA drive, yeah, there's not much in there. I was going to say, but then you run into this. You need to get more PCIe lanes to go there, or you get these. And this depends on your motherboard. Once again, running out of PCI lanes. But I feel like Wendell has done a couple of videos on bifurcation. But instead of bifurcating, they have some that have controllers on them, which limits some of the speed. But this is rather compact, and you can build a pretty compact NAS. There's a couple of companies out there, and I think this is great. Maybe someone will engineer some boards. I can't remember, at least one of them I've seen. There's a NAS company that does use a bunch of NVMEs. So those, those are kind of cool. Yeah, that's why you need like a backplane with its own controller. That way you're not trying to do everything. But of course, once you put a backplane with its own controller, now you have a different bottleneck and a different expense. And if that expense causes the system to cost more, like, hey, cool, I got this controller card, but it has so much more cost added to it. I just eliminated the cost savings, and I'm just going to stick SATAs in the box and get my work done. Yeah, this is the whole tricky part with the dual actuator. It's not bad to get them, but it's definitely just making sure you understand the challenges. I don't think it's on their current roadmap. I'll get something official out of TrueNAS. I do know the people there, so I'll post in their forums and just to have an official response of where it is. I think they're so new to the market that there's not a demand on the dual actuator drives right now. If there's a bigger demand coming on them, yeah, TrueNAS is going to follow market trends that develop towards them. Ugh. You're using the UDM Pro and downloading to an NVMe drive at the speeds of 220 with a 2.5 gig NIC. Is the UDM Pro limiting factor of my TrueNAS? Why are you routing storage? Will be always my first question. Don't route your storage, because many of the storage protocols were not really meant to be routed. So don't route through the storage. Oh yeah, this is true too. Broadcom bought the main maker of the PCI switch chips. Serve the Home, in their VMware article they wrote, and Patrick did a video on this. He talked about Broadcom's purchase of that company, because it was a promising company, and Broadcom says, wow, this company's doing great, we should buy them. And because that's how Broadcom works. It's data from the net, large files from a friend's NAS. It's hard to say exactly where the bottleneck is. Yeah, if you're pulling from the internet, you're probably using HTTPS. So this is a whole different issue. This is where people find themselves in trouble when they think they can get away with consumer drives to build enterprise setups, and realize that queue depth matters. You're like, wait, they can't take all these queues. Like my synthetic benchmark worked great, but as soon as I put 20 virtual machines on it, life sucked. Yeah, no right combining for you. This has happened 2 weeks ago. I had Brett Kelly from 45 Drives on the channel, and that's how we started out the conversation, was because it's a few times that they have had consulting that's come in, and they don't have any good news for the people. They think they're doing something wrong, like they've configured Ceph wrong, and that's why they can't get the performance. And they're like, did you buy a bunch of consumer drives? Is that what you bought? And they're like, yeah, well, that's actually the problem. There's not a magical command I can type that will make your consumer drives perform like the non-consumer ones. I mean, people think they can save a few dollars, and they can, but there's a trade-off. There's some myth going around occasionally that the consumer drives are just enterprise drives that didn't meet the spec, and they can't overcharge me for them. But they're different. Yes. Yeah. Someone had mentioned, and I should look this up because I had this information pulled up earlier. Someone said, and maybe it is, and I want to go on eBay and find this, because why not? So, someone told me Google is not helping me here. Oh, wait, someone did post in a forum on this. Hold on. So it looks like, let me share this. You can put some Optane in these. So I guess you have to have certain, okay, there's some specific layouts that you can do for Optane inside of the motherboard that I have in my HL15. It's kind of novel. I don't know if my processor supports it. I know Jeff from Craft Computing, he did a video on it, because Optane support is a combination of the motherboard and the processor, and you have to have like the right combination of them. It's neat. I really wished I wouldn't have quit making it, because it seemed pretty cool, but it is what it is. Last time I checked the dual actuator drives, they were about double the price of single. So unless they're limited These are recertified, so certified. Let's see how much they are. So you tell me if you think prices are, I don't know if this is a good price or a bad price, but these are what they're going for, at least on server part deals. 14 terabyte dual actuator drives on 159. They are recertified. So yeah. Yeah, the Hitachi Sam with 105 drives in it. Wow. Yeah, that does work. So I may do a separate video on using this for metadata as a fun. I haven't never done a metadata video, so I might do one for the hell of it. But one of the reasons this card was sitting next to my 45 drive server is some upcoming TrueNAS videos I'm diving into where I show how some of that works. Yeah, I think this is not an unreasonable price for recertified drives. You want to know if you want to use one port or do you want to use VLANs? It kind of comes down to how you want to set things up. I mean, you got to remember with VLANs, you're sharing the bandwidth. So is bandwidth the concern? There's also people who always recommend bonding. So they just take the WAN or if they have multiple WANs, set those aside and bond all the ports together and tie them together to your firewall or to your switch. I don't know. I'm not really bandwidth constrained most of the time because I'm not trying to route my storage through there. So I'll put a lot of things on a single port with several VLANs, but there's exceptions. For example, when I'm doing any security stuff, just because almost all the firewalls I use always have lots of ports on it, I just dedicate the other port to be my security network, and it's just a physically different port. That way, you can't VLAN hop when there's no VLAN to hop. There's never going to be a concern that would even be a problem on that port. So it doesn't matter. And I don't, well, actually there's some exceptions. Someone found a really interesting, I've shared this with security people over at UniFi. Someone has an interesting way that's not exactly VLAN hopping, but kind of is. There's a way they found to get a packet, by tricking a UniFi using Q&Q. It was a really interesting write-up, and it takes a lot of pre-knowledge. So it's like one of those, it's not a practical attack. We'll just say it's not practical, but they were able to be on one VLAN, have another VLAN. If they have a couple pieces of information, they would have to know the target VLAN, the target MAC of that VLAN. So they have to know the MAC address of the device you're targeting. And they could then do I think it was they were double queuing the packets, and the UniFi would then unwrap it improperly on the other port. But you could only get a packet to go that way. You couldn't get it to come back. It had no return path. So you had to have the knowledge of what you wanted to send a packet to, but that's it. You could get that packet there. So you couldn't even do a full TCP three-way handshake. So you're able to send data in a direction. But generally speaking, VLAN hopping's way overrated by people. It's also not that common. It's not zero, but it's not the most common attack vector. The number of people that seem to worry about it, though, is quite a bit. Cool thing with dual actuators is resilvering can be faster. Yes. But, well, I don't know. This is where things get weird. When I pull a drive out, I'm pulling two drives out. So is it faster? Because even if they're split between VDEVs, I have to resilver two drives, even though I physically pulled out one. So Yes, it's kind of a, I don't know if that really becomes faster or not. Yeah, once you start getting into thousands of files, the special VDEVs can be helpful. I have someone, I got to reach back out to them. They're building something interesting because they have some special caching needs. The number of files they have, I want to say, was 14 million. And I thought that was an interesting number. So there are companies that really have scaled these problems up. I'm like, you have 14 million files. And I won't disclose, but they're in the media and graphics industry, so I won't disclose the name of the company. But because my first question is, what industry do you work in? You have 14 million files that need to be in a particular namespace, and then it became very interesting how they do things. So yeah, there's definitely those special metadata VDEVs are very helpful for those situations. Dedicated port with no DHCP, just for backdoor management, so I can plug in a computer and manage the firewall directly. Yeah. VLAN hopping, not really an issue these days, but unable to disable management access on each switch port is an issue on some cheap switches. So you got about 16,000 files in a single directory. Yeah, that's a lot. Searching for files in the Explorer, also find blazing fast speed with special VDEVs. Just make sure to size respectively and keep track of the small block size limit. Yep. With the advancements in Unified Firewall, do you see any reason not to move forward using Netgate? Well, it still comes down to use case. Literally, we talked about this in our business meeting today at CNWR about, doing more work with UniFi. I think, and I got to see where they're at because I know they've improved it. There's not a lot of problems like there used to be. All right. There's not a lot of the problems like there used to be where with like the VPN and things like that. So I got to kind of double check to see that there's not any VPN issues that I know of. For let me describe it. When you're setting up VPN and someone has a need for, let's say, a bunch of people, I've got a company with 100 users. They want a VPN in, they want to tie to their Active Directory for authentication. And this is common and relatively easy to do inside of pfSense. You can set up OpenVPN, you can point it at their Active Directory server, and now Active Directory can serve as the place of truth for your username and password, whether you're VPNing in or if you're local. And if I change your password, they're one and the same. That's fantastic. A little fuzzier on how well UniFi does that. That's going to be the real question, is how well does UniFi does that now? Once I know how UniFi does that, and I do some testing with it, which I will, then that's one of the last little holdouts that I've had. I got to go over the list though, and I'll be doing a new video on it really soon to kind of dive deeper into those details. But yeah, for the most part, UniFi has caught up quite a bit. Now, one thing they still don't have, and this may not matter, but it's one of the things that's kind of bugged me, and I like that they have a listing now, a log of admin activity. But admin activity, and I got to turn my phone off. Everyone has decided to message me all at once. There we go. It's mute. Admin activity is fine and dandy, but what it doesn't give me that you have in pfSense is the configuration history to undo. So I can see that an admin made a change, or I can see that an admin did something. So for example, I was just showing Swifty earlier. And hey, look, there's those changes I made in the database to a certificate, to Swifty. And if I wanted to revert back to any one of these versions, absolutely I can. I can granularly go back and revert my pfSense to a previous state based on this admin history. I can see and do differentials through an XML file. That is not a feature UniFi has, and that is a feature I'd like them to have. That would be good. Now, another feature that'd be nice, and these are when I do an upcoming video, and boy, there's a lot of windows open. Let me get to the part I wanted to get to. WAN support for multiple IP addresses, kind of, well, this is where there's those little details of if you have some type of use case that is more specific than your average, then you probably won't want to do this. For example, I think someone brought this up, and I think that maybe what you're getting at here is we can build a series of IP addresses on the WAN, but if I'm not mistaken, you can't do two different blocks. I got to play with how that works. So I can to the secondary WAN. Where is that? Static IP. You can add a range. So must be a valid, okay, slash. There we go. So we can add a range. But can we add another range? The answer is yes, you can add dual ranges. Someone said you couldn't do this, and it looks like it works fine now. So multiple IP addresses, the answer is, I guess, yes. I just added a bunch of them. So they were getting there. Whoops. On that, well, they have that feature. So I can do that. Leave internet. Should be able to do this on the primary one. So that works. You can do it here too. Primary, secondary. We have the VPN. So yeah, I just got to do a deeper dive on it. It's on my to-do list. Any love for the UniFi Edge line? I think that line's going to go away, so I wouldn't put any. I'm pretty sure that line is just on its way out. There is a way to use radius authentication for OpenVPN. They have a new feature for it where you can do this. And I have not spent time with it, so I'm learning with all of you. But it's you change the radius profile and then you tie it to an external radius server. I have not spent time doing this, but my understanding is that's supposed to work. I'm really an opportunity for them is just to make it easy to integrate something like Entra ID in here or Active Directory as a one click. I mean, this is, a lot of enterprise firewalls do that. Can I make the text bigger? Why not? Do you have an example how to do inverted firewalls in pfSense? I have multiple VLAN interfaces every time I create a new one. I need to create blocking rules, which this might solve. There's an invert box on a firewall rule. I had a catastrophic failure with the cheapest Arachnus Networks router from, I've heard of Arachnus. I never use them. Don't know much about them. Yeah, it's possible with Radius. You cannot tie them. I was told there's a way. I just don't know the way to do it to get user authentication. So it currently is not simple, or at least obvious how to do it in here. This will be one of those things where I'll spend some time looking it up, but this appears to have the ability to set up and tie to a Radius server. So you could set up your Radius settings in here, you know, whatever that might be. Put the shared secret in, and then have this. I was putting gibberish in, and now that would be the server. Apply. So now if we go back over here to VPN, there we go. We pull it to this. So it's going to authenticate against this Radius profile. There you go. Now, one thing, it comes back down to use case. UniFi does not give you a lot of granular control for settings for OpenVPN server, but then again, do you need them? Kind of need if, I mean, I like it better that you have all the bells and whistles, but then again, most people don't change the bells and whistles and they leave things at default. And the defaults are not bad. It just, there's less options inside of here. Didn't latest UniFi OS add support for AD? Yeah, they're adding some support, but I haven't tested it. So I'm a little fuzzy on how that works. You know what UniFi needs? Good documentation, because people ask, Tom, why haven't you made a video on it? I'm like, well, I read documents, and there's other people who comment on my videos that I always laugh. They go, Tom, you just read the docs and make a video. I'm like, I sure do. That is the source of many of my videos, is the documentation. So I'm going to need some documentation on it. So I know they're talking about integrations with it, but talking about integrations with it is great. And I need the integrations in order to actually, you know, do the video. I guessing my way through it is way harder to do. That's, you know, I complain all the time to Ubiquity, like, hey, this should be documented, or how this should be set up should be documented. And by the way, WireGuard, there's no AD authentication for WireGuard. I've talked about this many times. WireGuard does not have any type of user auth system. So OpenVPN does. That's why OpenVPN is still so popular. If we need to authenticate users, OpenVPN is going to be the more popular way to do it. Doesn't mean other tools haven't built things on top of WireGuard. Now, all of this becomes a little bit, this is where the rub is with me. And not really rub, it's just where the problem is. I need to set up UniFi Identity again in order to get this working, because UniFi Identity is another way to tie it. And they're working with tying UniFi Identity to, I think, what is this going to be under? This system should support it. But we need a UniFi Identity set up. That way we can, this doesn't have it, I guess. Huh. I thought the EFG supported identity. I guess it does not. Interesting. So the EFG does not have support for, or it doesn't appear to have support for building an identity on this, unless I'm missing where it is. But oddly, if we switch to the other system, we can install, well, we can actually, this one needs an update. I'll have to do a UniFi identity setup and see how it integrates. I'll let this update to the latest version. Yep, WireGuard is just public, private, key, shared secrets. That's it. This is one of the things that drives the success of any firewall or ecosystem in general. How good is the documentation? Because one of the problems I had when I was doing a firewall review 2 years ago that apparently made some people quite angry was when I was covering the Fortinet. I said Fortinet didn't have some features. People came at me telling me it has the features, but there's no documentation for those features. And I'm like, well, then do they exist? They're like, oh yeah, I just contact my my Fortinet support person and they set it up for me. So I realize there's a ton of undocumented, or at least there's no landing pages and no documents for it, features of some firewalls, which is its own thing. So identity is under users, someone just said. All right, let's look under admins and users. Okay. So that's where. I agree. Get started. I will do this later. I will take the time to set this up because I'm going to set up a whole demo on doing things with Ubiquity. So I'll play around with their identity, one-click VPN, and I'll see how it ties into the Windows ecosystem, because I know they've made some bridges for some of that. Do you think Netgate will kill off pfSense CE? Been in support of the project for over 10 years. We hate to see it go. I think we're watching the death, unfortunately, of open source firewalls. I mean, there's just not much out there anymore. I love where OpenWRT is going. I think building your own hardware and building these is neat, but OpenWRT is solves these niche problems for home users or travel routers, but doesn't try to address the business market at all. OpenWRT is like good enough for probably a lot of HomeLab people. I think I've heard mixed reviews. Matter of fact, my first problem with OpenWRT, I tried loading it on my Zima and it just keeps locking up, and I don't know why. My Zima runs everything fine except for OpenWRT. I don't know why. So I've got another piece of hardware. After I finish, I set it aside because I'm gonna do some TrueNAS videos, but I have OpenWRT sitting on top of one of those little Kotam firewalls. I'm going to load it on there and see how it works. I'm curious about it. I want to see just how bad. Everyone says the web UI is mediocre, but I'll play around with it as an alternative. But I don't think we're going to see. I think we're watching a downward curve of open source, especially in the BSD world, which is your pfSense and OpenSense. I don't know. I don't think the future looks bright for them, is kind of how I'm feeling here in 2025. We'll see how that goes. And my mixed love-hate with UniFi. Their firewalls were always one of the big shortcomings. But by the way, UniFi is not open source at all. But boy, they've done a compelling job of making something that, first, they don't lock out. You can SSH in, you can poke around under the hood. That doesn't make it open source, but at least it's not a black mystery box where I have no visibility into it. It is built on top of Linux, and it's a novel tool. It solves a lot of problems. It works well. It's very affordable, because that's where, if pfSense does decide to get rid of CE, that only leaves OpenSense. But I feel OpenSense is fracturing more, and OpenSense is, hey, I need more water since you're down here. Ooh, I like those. I know I seen an update from OpenSense when they had broke VLANs with all the updates, pretty basic functionality. I forget, someone had pointed me to a kerfuffle in their forums or all the support, and it took them about a day to fix it. People just had to revert back. But I'm just like, if they can't keep it together and they keep having lots of bugs and problems with OpenSense, pfSense at least as of right now, the CE version exists and there's not any reason not to use it, but it's kind of getting long in the tooth. It's been a year since an update. It's had patches, so they're keeping up with security on it, but whether or not they're going to spin the next version, I think maybe they will, but it looks like it's slow and far between. Thank you, son. Yeah, and this is the sad thing. If pfSense does this, they're going to abandon the HomeLab market, and I think that's the market that built them. If they decide they're going to abandon it, okay, then so be it. I don't like, this is the same problem. Like Sophos XG Home exists to try to get people to use it, but do I trust Sophos not to do the same thing Arista did? Arista bought Untangle, and they kept the home for a while, and then they go, bye, you're done. We're done with the HomeLab license, and then it goes away. What is pfSense CE missing compared to the commercial version? I'm not going to say much. You get the two big ones. The real big one is boot environments. I think the boot environments are awesome on the commercial version. That's not happening with the pfSense CE version. It'll never be a feature. Second one, NetFlow. The NetFlow is better if you're using NetFlow. That's all that matters. Are you using NetFlow? If you're not using it, then it suddenly doesn't matter. Yeah, the QAT crypto is not going to be added. That is a enhanced feature. I don't know if it's really something the home users are really clamoring about, though. It's hard to say. My son bought me a Reese's cup. I love Reese's cups. I mean, Tensor's cool, but I don't know anyone who uses it. I've never tried it. I don't have an interest in it. We don't have any clients. I haven't run into any clients running the Tensor version. So yeah, Sophos XG is limited to 4 cores and 6 gigs of RAM. I don't know what that means in terms of actual limitations, because obviously 4 cores. So, okay, I buy a CPU that has higher clock rate, but less cores and it performs better. I don't know. What does that limit me to in speed? I don't know the answer. I think it's a weird way to put a limit on a firewall, to say 4, we're going to limit you to cores, because Untangle made sense. Their home, I did videos on Untangle years ago. I thought it was a great choice. Untangle's limitation for home users were like, they gave you this home user package for a reasonable price per year. There was some limitation on count of devices to be so many 100 devices, which I think is reasonable for a home user. There's always that one home user, Tom, I have 10,000 devices on my network at home. Okay, you're the exception, not the rule. Sorry. But for the most part, I thought it was a reasonable offering on the home user one. I don't think, and this is the other side. I don't think pfSense Plus is crazy expensive. And the downside about pfSense Plus, the part that is splitting hairs, but I will be on the side of people who are purist on open source, is you're getting an operating system that is mostly open source. You are built on open source, but not completely. Not all source code available. So any extra features, the differences between pfSense Community Edition and pfSense Plus are not open source. They only open source the non-parts, the things that are the same in both of them are open source. But I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's not end of the world. It's kind of, I wish the world was more open source, but it's not problem. If you're, the people who get really righteous about open source are also sometimes impractical people. I mean, if I was so indignant about open source, I wouldn't have a phone. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of a computer, probably. If I were to try to run all things in my life only on open source software, I would fall short of getting a lot of things done. I tried using an open source video editing for years. I regret that decision. I should have learned DaVinci sooner because it helped me create better content faster. And DaVinci is a great tool, but it is closed source. UniFi is updating the UXG gateways. They just don't. They are not the. They don't seem to get the updates as fast. Like, they're not going away. They're still updating them, but you definitely on the UXG gateways, they lag behind compared to the other ones. Speaking of open source, any thoughts on the ActivePrect? You know, I will do a video on it. I'll probably do a weekend live stream on it. I've had the box for a little while. I think it's novel. It's expensive, but not expensive. I don't know. Wendell's video is great on it. Like, Wendell did a good job reviewing it. It's kind of cool that Synology is kind of going after that market, but Synology is still missing a feature for my market that I've been talking to them about for years. And I don't know how that's going to, or if that's ever going to be solved. One of the things that Synology could be doing is giving me a dashboard for centralized backups so I could see backups at all the clients. Synology has never fulfilled that feature. They've talked about it, never got it done. And the new backup device by Synology is targeting enterprises with a really good backup solution. It's solid. It's really targeted for enterprise companies that don't want to use Veeam. I think that's great. It's not as much in my market, but it's for the enterprise market, and we do sell to some things in the enterprise market. So I get it. It's cool. It's a cool enterprise solution. It saves you from a lot of subscription fees. You pay upfront for your Synology box, and you get a really nice high-end Synology box that can manage backups across an enterprise company. That's fantastic. I think that it's got a cool market niche for that, but that's it. Like, I don't know. Wendell's definitely much more enthusiastic about it. I'm not down on the product. I think it's great. It just was less interesting me I have finite amounts of time, as we all do. And I decided my time was not worth, I didn't want to spend a ton of time on that device. So maybe I'll do a video, or I'll bring it up in a live stream and just kind of talk about it. But yeah, watch Wendell's video. I don't disagree with anything Wendell said. I did watch Wendell's video, and I think he did a good job. Did Synology release a price on that? Let's see. Can I find the link to it? That's their press. Synology Active Protect. Can I find a price tag? It looks like a few people did videos on it. But did anyone give us a price? I got the... So let me convert that. So about $40K. All right. So it costs about what? It's in the $40,000. Okay. I couldn't remember if Wendell said the price or not. I don't know that I burn them in. I'm not going to fill up. Like, for example, when we set up a new ZFS system, I'm going to load some data on there. I'm going to use FIO to do some reading and writing to test them. But I'm not going to, like, we just, when we build out like these, especially large ones, when you talk like a petabyte of storage, I'm not loading up an entire petabyte of storage on it. So yeah, putting the drives in the Z pool they belong in, doing some FIO testing, dumping some data to it, give it a go. I don't really think there's a need unless you are absolutely worried about this and want to do it. Like, you could fill an entire system up. And the more important thing isn't testing each individual drive. That is definitely not how I would recommend doing it in the modern era. You can, if you want to, go down that rabbit hole. The way you want to test is more aligned with what it will be used for. For example, it's not like the drives individually are what matters. It's the drives as a whole, because you can actually test the drives. They all test great. You start loading your production data on there and it has a problem. When I have found problems, it has usually not been the drives. Occasionally it is. Some drives do go bad. What you run into is you're loading up the data, and you'll find that when you have a bunch of drives together, let's say 60 of them, you'll find maybe there's a power problem. You'll find that there's a problem with one of the controller boards that's talking to the drives. So I test all the drives as they are, once they are installed and the VDEVs and the ZFS pools all created and set up. That's when you test the drive. OpenSense or pfSense for web application firewall. Well, neither one of them are a web application firewall, technically. So I would say 0. Neither one of those is the answer. Have you noticed TrueNAS issues booting UniFi instead of BIOS? Not that I can think of. I don't know how often I use UniFi though compared to BIOS. I have to look at. I don't know which ones. What is FIO? FIO is the flexible IO tester. So if you just type in, let me find the documentation. There we go. When in doubt, read the docs. Flexible IO tester. Any general VDEV recommendations? I can't give general VDEV recommendations. Every use case is specific. I mean, I guess there are some general things, like don't make VDEVs wider than 10. You can make them a little bit. You can do a 12 wide VDEV. You could probably, if you have SSDs, have no problem with a 15 wide VDEV. There's my general recommendations. Don't make them wider than 10 if they're spinning Rust, and definitely not wider, or maybe up to 15 if they're SSDs. Oh, yeah. And I wish this wasn't something that really happened, but it did. Someone had, it was 80 or 100 drives. They put them in one VDEV. So they put one giant VDEV, and they started putting a lot of data on there. And they didn't think about it, but they were realizing it takes a long time. They were really disappointed with how poor the performance was, but they just kept writing that data to it. And after a week or two of writing data, and I mean literally like a week or two, they had that much data. That's when they decided to contact me, because it wasn't getting faster. And it also meant they had to get all the data off. They were doing a move, they moved sections of it. It was a mess. They did not like the answer I gave them. You can't just rebuild without reloading the data. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's a WAF package running on OpenSense. I don't know which one. I don't use OpenSense, so if they have an extra WAF package, cool. I was unaware of it. News to me. So that means if there's not one for pfSense, that much I can answer. It looks like you can load Nginx, I guess. I don't know. I'm looking in their documentation. They're considering Nginx one, I guess. Okay. I don't know that I would. I mean, Nginx is not exactly that. It kind of is. I guess in some ways, HA proxy, which is HA proxy is available for both. You can build rules inside of HA proxy. It's not exactly the same as a dedicated web application firewall, but okay. Do you work with international customers? If so, how can I contact? Yes, we do. You head over to lawrencesystems.com. My website is where I am contacted. Easy to find my website. It's linked everywhere on my YouTube channel, and there's a form you can click to fill out. This goes to the sales team, and we see how we can help you. I have not had any new hot sauces lately. Maybe I'm getting too repetitious. I keep using the same ones all the time, but it works. Any overlay VPN like NetBird where this management plane can only be accessed from internal network. In other words, where the management plane is separate from the GUI panel for normal users for extra security. NetBird has, I mean, NetBird is only a management plane because your users shouldn't be going to NetBird. Your users should have NetBird on their systems that connect them the way you managed it through the control plane. So I don't understand the question, maybe. In Tailscale is kind of the same way. I mean, Tailscale NetBird, from a user standpoint, because we have companies using things like those tools, you don't generally the users are kind of transparent to it. Once it's set up on their device, it's just an always on VPN. Like the general users don't log into the control plane. Yes, hit the like button. I'm actually going to wind this down in a few more minutes because I have a few more things I have to finish today. So is there any more final questions before I wind this down? I'll give it a few more minutes here. Networking questions or whatever. We've talked about drives. We've talked about a lot of things here. We talked a little bit about UniFi. I need to set up the new identity stuff with UniFi. Cold sauces. Why wouldn't you? Well, I would not recommend blocking quick, but that's unless you want people to have a lesser experience. So no, I wouldn't block that. Do you recommend running pfSense Pro on Protected or Netgate? Oh, always Netgate. The Netgate hardware is way better than the Protect Heli stuff. As someone with no certifications, I don't know the answer to that. How do I feel about TLDs like the .tk? I think it's fun when something uses them as like part of a spelling. I don't know. I don't really have any other opinion on them. Any reviews of the announced UniFi hardware coming up? Yes. I have new switches that I want to take them apart to do the review. So, because that's more fun. Am I going to go with UniFi firewalls? It's not like I'm getting rid of pfSense, but for a lot of more basic usage for customers, the UniFi firewalls are pretty compelling because we're already using UniFi switching and UniFi access points. It's keeping everybody in one ecosystem that works well. It makes sense. Yeah. .art domain. There's so many funny ones. I mean, the managed panel is accessible from outside and can be used to give access to new devices, which considers security risk if you pointed out in your video. I mean, you can lock down the management interface to put a firewall in front of it, set the rules in your hosting provider to say like, hey, this access is locked down to this IP address for the web interface. I've heard XCP having disk performance issues. Is this only when using local storage? So this is a good write-up in my forums, and this is where people get confused constantly, and it comes down to people who run benchmarks versus people who actually use the systems. When you're benchmarking a single drive, yes, there are some performance limitations. It's not as fast because you're virtualizing the storage. It's not as fast as raw storage. And matter of fact, in some circumstances, depending on the speed of your CPU, it may not be as fast as using a external NAS, but that doesn't scale the same way. The performance is locked to the drive and the single thread for that particular VM. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm running virtual hosts, like something like XCPNG, I'm usually running a lot of VMs. Each VM cumulatively has a, so to speak, upper limit on performance. And almost always what you run into is the cumulative value of the VMs, you run into the hardware limitation, not the software. So even though you say, okay, I can only use, let's say, 80% of the drive in terms of performance. If I built the system raw, it's 100% fast. When I virtualize it, it's 80% fast. But I'm not running a single VM. I'm usually running a lot of VMs, let's say 8 VMs. Well, seeing as the second VM would take up the rest of the performance, it doesn't scale. So it's a non-issue. It's an issue people like to talk about when they benchmark, but from a actual use case, you're not running a single. Many of the people that we're setting these, systems up for are running 20, 30, 40 VMs. So even if they're running local storage, it's not really an issue. I don't know. I don't deal with web application firewalls. It's not something I do very often. So I couldn't tell you which is the best. I don't really spend a lot of time with them. Do you have recommendations for a modern TrueNAS server, something that can hold 24, 36 bays, running an old Supermicro? I would like something that is more power efficient. I really like the 45 drives hardware, but I mean, an HL15 sounds like it doesn't have enough bays for you. The thing about 45 drives hardware is if you get something like a Q30, which is going to fit more into your budget, you can buy just the basic one and load it up yourself. But the 45 drives Q30, it's going to be, if you loading it up with some SATA drives, you have a standard motherboard in there, kind of consumer-ish, Supermicro, something that's ATX, something pretty normal. You can get a relatively good power efficient system out of that. No, there's not going to be anything as good as the PF Blocker or Pi-hole, but you can still use Pi-hole with a UniFi. I don't even use Pi-hole or PF Blocker because they kind of, I don't know. I think they're overrated. I just use uBlock in my browser and call it a day. No, I'm not likely to do a video on tail-scale ACLs. They're complicated, and I don't think there's enough market demand for it. Like, they have documentation, and most of the time the ACLs are not the big deal. if you're doing things well, you're basing all your identity on what they refer to as zero trust. And I should do a video on zero trust because it's a better architecture as defined by NIST zero trust, which means we use identity for authentication, not location, or location on the network to be more specific. So for example, I use identity for my HomeLab things. If I dropped you on my network, you would look around and go, well, this is boring. I can't log into anything because I don't have credentials. This is where much of the market is going. And it's actually why many of the attacks now are identity-based attacks, because as you suddenly don't need VPN to get into things, you use your identity provider to get into things. That's the better way to go. So it's not like we spend all day, coming up with the perfect rule set to block everything but the one single port they need to access the service. It's more about we look at what the identity provider is, and make sure that that's working properly. Any JBOT enclosure recommendations? Not really. Everything becomes kind of messy when you do it that way. Back to the power efficient question someone had. Most of the time when you start finding GBODs, you don't find power efficiency in the same sentence. So if you're just, use super micro boxes are great. They work solid. If you're looking for a good deal, there's definitely plenty of them floating around on eBay that can do some good builds, but you sacrifice power efficiency. I reckon the reason storage make it hard to bulk restore is probably one of cost. The data is probably stored in slow storage. No, that isn't why. I have a whole video about over provisioning CPUs. Hypervisor for small, medium business, how to choose between Hyper-V, Proxmox, Nutanix. Really easy. I don't use Proxmox. I think Hyper-V is okay if you're using a single VM, maybe. I'm not a big fan of Hyper-V. We go with XCP-ng. Yeah, cobbling together things. Now, I am going to help a friend cobble together a fun project because we're going to do it. Do I recommend it? There's a whole different thing. 45 drive server, add a disk shelf and extend it with SAS connectors. Yes, but when you start tying it all together and extending things with SAS connectors, did you save any or did you create a different project? It's one of those things. Wendell has a great video just on finding all the connectors to get them all together. And that can be its own challenge. I have a client, he's on a budget and he cobbled together several disk shelves. The solution that he came up with is clever, but because it saves money, but it also is kind of a headache. He can't reboot his TrueNAS without unplugging all of them. He has to boot his TrueNAS up, let it give some error message, then go plug all the disk shelves in, and then finish booting it up. And I think he's got to re-import the pool each boot, or it doesn't work right. I don't bother with a identity provider on my HomeLab. I just don't need it. And not everything I have would integrate into it. There are open source identity providers out there. I think they're fun projects so you can learn how it works. I know how it works and I don't feel like integrating that in there. Because for example, I can use SAML to log into all my XCP-ng systems. Instead, I use username and password. SAML would make it nice. So I just would build a SAML auth into anything that supported it, but not everything supports SAML auth or an identity provider. So the inconvenience of usernames and passwords is not that much of an inconvenience to me. I don't know how much you could do to increase your power efficiency, because efficiency is what happens when you buy it. End of story. So if I'm going to buy an old Dell, there's no power efficiency. If I'm going to buy a mini PC, there's power efficiency. Oh, I do love the new landing page. Yes. Let's pull that up real quick because that made me I shouldn't say more than anything else, it had me confused. I seen this and I was like, whoa, what? Wait, hold on here. What am I clicking on? I thought I was lost. So let me bring it over here. Yeah, this is the new landing page. So we're getting there. I'm excited. Look at this. It's got the right color theme. I was like, oh, when I updated, but then I logged in. See, and this is to me like I just hit fill in with my password manager. That's my identity provider. Is that so? That's I mean, I know it'd be convenient to use SAML, but yeah. Yeah, I was same thing. Yep, these are the two, Authentic and Keycloak are two popular open source identity providers. Yeah, it's all about choices. Like for example, Raspberry Pis are nice and low powered. So if you want to build a low powered home lab, Raspberry Pi, there's a good thing. But then again, you're like, wait, Raspberry Pi won't run the thing I want. Well, you have to kind of figure out and temper your expectations what will or won't work in your home lab. Yeah, they're going to have the new version. I think this year we should have the updated version of it. I think. Hold on. Where's one of my systems that I can show it? Is it? Yeah, it's coming along. But lots of they haven't updated it in a little while. It's just slowly looking cool, but not that cool. I love the color theme. It does have a nicer look, but yeah, it's very much not feature complete right now. So we still live in the old one. Such is life. I think you should be using ChatGPT. You're asking like the most random questions. Any solution for system control not found? There is a complete lack of context for that question. I don't. So yeah, I'm going to suggest that head over to ChatGPT and poke away at that for a little while. That might be helpful to you. Thank you, Tom, for doing these live streams. I think I speak for everyone. I say the videos and streams are much appreciated. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I think the market is pretty big and there's an opportunity for HexOS to be successful in that market. Is it the same people that follow my channel? No. I think all of you that have been hanging out with me the last couple hours are probably far more technical than the HexOS audience. I still think there's a lot of people who want to host their own stuff, don't mind using a cloud web interface to do it. There's this in-between audience that will probably find it. So I think there's a market for HexOS. It's probably just not all of you. I think Alta Labs is interesting, but I've been testing their switches for a while. They work. I've not had any problems with them, but yeah. ChatGPT will lead you in the right and so many wrong directions. Yes. You know what, though? It answers a lot of basic questions for if you're new to tech. Yes, you can get a lot of basics answered, and ChatGPT, I think, does a fun job of that. Any thoughts on the OS part of HexOS? Well, it's running TrueNAS on the back end. HexOS, to be very simplistic, is something that sits on top of TrueNAS. And I think what someone just said here would load HexOS for my sister and brother-in-law. You know, definitely. I've been using UniFi for home users and family for a while. I think it's the best solution for family. I put them in my dashboard because I'm the one that's getting a call if a family member needs help. And it's in my dashboard. I can see it. I can see if it's on. I can see if it's not on. So I instantly have visibility. I'm the call anyways. That's great. And I think HexOS may be one of those things. Like, it gives us a dashboard we'd be able to log into. They want to have the things they have under NAS, but then you have the dashboard because it's your problem anyways. If it actually goes wrong, at least you have a dashboard to see if it's going wrong. HexOS is addressing the same people who might prefer a Synology NAS. Yes, that's who they're competing with, the Synology. They're not really competing with all of you talking about TrueNAS in here. That's definitely how I feel. Like, the more technical, I want to DIY things. Because, matter of fact, the DIY people don't like Synology. And there's a lot of people that really hate on Synology because it's not like is an open ecosystem. I like Synology, and I have a couple of Synologies. I love the application on Synology. I think the active backup on Synology is amazing, but there's people who seem to disagree with me even on that. Yeah, and this is the thing. It kind of takes it can teach you stuff, but it gets things wrong, and it doesn't get them all. It takes a while. ChatGPT is good as long as you realize where it's not good, and that sometimes is not the best teacher of things. But I seen someone throwing out a lot of random questions that didn't seem to have a theme, and I don't know if they're trying to do it for engagement. But at some point, if they're asking about what what packet should I look for a reverse shell was one question, and if they were asking about a web application firewall earlier. I don't know what rabbit hole they're going down, but the questions are kind of popping around. So my suggestion sometimes is like, turn it into a better themed question, and ChatGPT can kind of help you with that. Yeah, the same person, Ronnie, who was supposed to know, was asking. They said, system control not found, and somewhere before they said something about a reverse shell. I don't know the context by which you're asking these questions. And then the other questions, I'm scrolling up, were like, what is the best WAF? It's kind of a weird question. I mean, F5 and several other companies make some good ones, but those are probably best started as like a Google search. If Synology supported something like Xpanology, BYOD, I'd totally pay 100, 150 perpetual license. Yeah, I think that'd be kind of novel, but I think that becomes really hard for the companies to support, because this is even, if you look through sometimes bug reports or submissions to TrueNAS, I think they do a good job. They're basing it on Debian, but there are submissions where people are having hardware problems because they brought their own hardware. Synology kind of shortcuts all that. Synology updates go really, really well because Synology predicts the hardware. They've prescribed it, I should say, not predicts. They prescribed that this box runs this. End of story. Once that has become true, okay, then it's not going to ever have a problem because it's running exactly what's the expected hardware specs, the expected drives in some cases with their enterprise ones. So your updates go in a very predictable manner. And I get that. Like, from a support standpoint, I mean, the Synology device that Wendell was talking about that just got released today, it's a per spec exacting system to do exactly its task. And Synology offers support on it, and they can, because it's designed to do that task, end of story, full stop. And I think that's cool. A cool way to do it. But I'm going to stop here. I'm a little tired. I was a little tired when I started. I'm a little more tired now, and I got a lot of people to reply to. So yeah. Well, the problem is hardware and software support are one and the same. And And sometimes the problem that you think is a software problem, the error I was having here's a really easy example. Scroll back to the beginning of the video with dual actuator drives. They show up as 2 drives. I can do ZFS from the command line, so they're supported, but TrueNAS has all kinds of problems with it. So all my problems so far with that has been hardware problems, but are they software problems? They recognize the drives, but they don't work. So once again, now you know where the problem becomes of what's the difference. It's not that once you start changing to your own hardware, you run into things that may not work. But thanks, everyone. Actually, I'll answer this last question. Thanks for the storage video. Works great. Would you use it for remotes and XCP-NG? I tried with no success. Where is it at here? Which one is this? I got too many windows open. 1 second. Settings, remotes. I've had no problems at all with it. I've been backing up to it. This is my storage account, and it works. So test your remote. I don't know that I'm going to do a video on it, but I haven't had any issues getting it to work. So storage A works perfectly fine with Zen Orchestra. But I'm going to bounce out of here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Awesome to see all of you here. I have been implementing the workflow, so the things have been updated on previous videos for all the chapters on these live streams. So if anyone missed something, if you wait within 24 hours, because it takes a while for it to process, chapters have been are being put into the videos after they're done. So later, everyone, and take care.